Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. If you could hide to Kolob, really exciting to be here with you today for this quick special episode. My name's Daniel. This is my brother Clive.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, welcome, Daniel. It's very exciting. The church has just announced that they've bought a lot of things. The Kirtland Temple properties around there. I mean, there's actually a lot of stuff. There's a huge list of things that the church has bought from the what was the RLDS and then eventually changed. But yeah, really exciting. So yeah, should we discuss some of the things that we've bought?
I thought we should, and I wanted to do a bit of a tour. The total value, if I'm not mistaken, was 129 million US dollars, which is almost 200 Aussie dollars. So a lot of money. There's some really interesting things in there. But what I actually thought I wanted to show you, Clive, is I've done a little bit of homework today. And if I just share my screen here, I just wanted to show what actually was purchased by the church. This is Nauvoo. So the church purchased a significant amount of properties in Kirtland and Nauvoo. So the Kirtland Temple is obviously the headline here. The Nauvoo Temple obviously is already a current working temple. So the headline is the Kirtland Temple, but actually there's so much more detail. I mean, one of the things I saw on the list was the door from Liberty Jail. So the church is certainly, these are random things. Who, at some stage, I'm sure someone will tell us where that was, if that was in a basement somewhere, or I really don't know, but really interesting. So a few things to show. So for those who don't know, so the Nauvoo Temple is up here, and there's so many up and down all of these streets here. These are the streets that were designed by the early church members. Certainly, Joseph Smith drew a little map, and he wanted to show everything was going to be kind of in these squares, and the temple's going to be in the middle. I think from memory, he wanted 6 temples. It was in this area here. I'll have to check that reference, but I'm sure just from some of my early studies that he wanted 6 temples in the middle. So there's a couple of interesting things. Down here is Nauvoo House. There's also something down here as well called the Biderman Stables, which is next to this red brick store here. When when Emma moved back to the area, she opened these as lodgings, as kind of like a hotel. There is one thing over here that the Smith family cemetery, which is just located here, wasn't included in the purchase, but all of these other properties here were. So obviously there's significance there. That's something that just couldn't be given away. But the Smith family cemetery is not in the possession of our faith. It's still in the possession of the Community of Christ. So this area here, Sydney Street, you'll see this is named after Sydney Rigdon. Parley Street as well. So a whole bunch of things. The Smith home was purchased as well. A lot of things called unnamed blocks was purchased, or vacant blocks, undeveloped blocks were purchased as well. So essentially just bits of land. So lots of things. More down in this southern area, as you get up to where the temple is, a lot of this is already owned by a lot of these properties here were owned by the Community of Christ, which are now owned by us. And the other one I wanted to show, Clive, was actually here in Kirtland. So this is Kirtland itself. This is the temple right here, and this is the visitor center. Now, this entire quadrant here was owned by the Community of Christ. So this is what's been purchased, the Kirtland Temple and the visitor center. There's some other blocks. So these houses here were bought by the church as well, along with this small property here was bought by the church. This one here was bought by the church, and another unnamed block on this road, which I can only assume might be this vacant land.
Well, I assume that, now that everyone knows this has happened, there's going to be a lot of church members who want to go visit these areas. So I imagine the church is prepared for that, trying to get all these empty vacant blocks for car parking and whatnot.
The only other thing was up here, church already owns this part. So this is the historic visitor center here, Neil K. Whitney store. You can read that. And then there's a small historical village in this area here. So this kind of area is all owned by our church. As you go more south, this is owned by the Community of Christ. formerly, now owned by our church. So a lot of properties have exchanged hands, um, but certainly along with the properties, a lot of historical items. Like I said, there's the Liberty Jail door, which was one. The church has said when the church's release list, they essentially just broke it up into um, this is non-historic buildings in Kirtland, but list. Historic buildings with modernized interiors in Nauvoo, list. Private residences, list. So a lot of different areas, but a lot of, the Kirtland Temple is obviously huge. The Smith family home is huge. The mansion house, it just goes on and on. Some things that I was really interested, Clive, was there's a lot of manuscripts.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah, the original translations of the Bible that Joseph Smith translated, and yeah, it's pretty exciting because I think of that and I think new scriptures. We talked about that in our podcast only a couple of weeks ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think for me, I've collected a lot of the Joseph Smith papers, and I really like looking at some of the journals and the reasons as to why the translations occurred the way that they did. One big one that we'll see from this acquisition is the translation of the Bible and Joseph Smith's own Bible that he used that he made notes in.
Yep.
So it'll be incredibly interesting to see actually what that was, what comments he made, and is there any other insights into those? So that's really exciting.
And there's that Karata's document, that one, where they think it might be symbols from the Book of Mormon, from the gold plates.
Oh yeah, sure. Yes, no, that was included as well. So that's another thing again.
Yeah. So there's a lot to come about. It's pretty exciting.
There's a lot, and it's interesting to see how all these things are still floating around. Like one entire section was objects from the original temple building. So like a moon shape, or fittings, chairs, couches. I imagine a lot of this stuff's going to end up in a museum. One of them, Joseph Smith's writing desk, was in there. Emma's writing desk was in there. So I'm assuming at some stage they might go to Salt Lake potentially and be in a museum. I'm not sure too many people have the means to get all the way out to Nauvoo. So I don't imagine that the church would store a lot of stuff over there. It's kind of not in the middle of nowhere, respectfully, but it's not exactly a flight in. It's, for us at least, it'd be multiple flights and driving and whatnot. So I imagine a lot of it will go to Salt Lake, be in a museum there, but certainly when you then finally can make it to Kirtland, make it to Nauvoo to see some of these other items would just be fascinating.
Something to note as well, the Community of Christ, they've used the Kirtland Temple more like a visitor center. They stopped practicing temple ordinances long time ago. And the church has officially announced that they're not going to make the Kirtland Temple a temple. They're not going to dedicate it. They are going to keep it more of a historical building.
I had a look at some of the wording as well, and a lot of it says that it will be open. I think it was the 25th of March. Some of it, the wording of what the church released might suggest that some things might close later on. I'm not really sure. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening. And Joseph Smith round papers round 2. So do we want to talk? I know I've studied it a little bit. I definitely know you have, about how Emma Smith had all these things and how all that came to be. We know, obviously, I think basic knowledge is that, of course, when the Saints, when Brigham Young led the pioneers out west and went out to Utah, that Emma stayed behind. She, of course, remarried later on to a guy called Louis Biderman. But she had Joseph Smith III, who would go on to be the prophet of the RLDS. I've got that right, don't I?
Yeah, so the Reformed Latter-day Saints is what they originally called themselves. And for a long time, they wanted to separate themselves from the Latter-day Saints because they didn't want to be known as the Reformed, because in their mind, they were the originals, because that's the way they were thinking. So yeah, a lot of things have happened for this to occur. And yeah, I don't want to get into like a RLDS bashing session, but I just want to go a few points.
Strong.
So yeah, one of the original beliefs was descendants of Joseph Smith should be the next prophet. So, like you said, Joseph
Yeah.
Smith III, he was the first prophet essentially, and then
Yeah.
it went on from generation to generation, and
And he was a young man, right? He was quite a young man when Joseph Smith Jr. died, and kind of they had to wait a little bit for him to be able to lead this
yeah,
church.
that's right. Yeah,
It was early teens, I think, from memory, but I'm happy to be wrong. I'm not an expert in that particular religion, but I know he was a young man. I remember was it Porter Rockwell and Joseph Smith III, after Joseph was dead, hugged each other, and Porter Rockwell said he's the only friend I ever had, and he consoled with Joseph Smith III when they found out that Joseph Smith Jr. had died.
yeah. Fast forwarding through that, because I mean, Emma Smith, just massive, massive respect for her. I don't want to really tarnish her name, but in the 1960s, sort of the church started to change a bit, and that's where they came up with the idea of no more temples for temple ceremonies. By the 80s, they decided that women should receive the priesthood, and then by the 90s,
Oh, really? I didn't
yeah, I
know
think it was
that.
like 80, 84 or something. They decided women should receive the
Okay.
priesthood. And then by the late 90s, there wasn't, every time we have a new prophet, because the previous prophet died, but I think it was 1997, their prophet retired. And that was
Right.
their justification for not having a Joseph Smith descendant. They got somebody else. And so,
Okay.
they had a lot of break off at that point, and then so they lost a lot of money, and then the doctrine started to change, and they decided that instead of having tithing, they would have what they called disciples generous response, and that basically say that how much you can afford is how much you should give in tithing. And so they lost a lot of money that way, and then they had a vote in the 2000s about changing the name, and that's when they decided that the majority voted on Community of Christ, and
Okay.
that's yeah. And again, and then by 2010, they only had 250,000 members. So
Right.
it's one of these things that it's a slow build up, but it's working in our favor, obviously. But unfortunately for them, they just lost a lot of members, and then COVID happened, and they lost even more money from COVID, and so they've been struggling a lot through the years. And I think this is sort of the point where, because the church didn't say, all right, I'll give you X amount for this and X amount of this. The church has been working with the Community of Christ for a long time. And it's just
Long
really,
time,
really long
long time.
time. Yeah. I remember Gordon B.
Yeah, I'm sure
Hinckley.
I saw.
I think
Sorry,
I
yeah.
remember one thing I remember was Gordon B. Hinckley going. So that was the 90s, going and speaking with the people at that time.
I'm sure we've been working with the Community of Christ for, I'm gonna say, 40 years. I recall, and again, I don't know my history well enough, but I think it was the 70s where the church started acquiring documents that would end up becoming the Joseph Smith papers, and a lot of that was purchased, I think, from Independence,
Right.
which that site in Independence has nothing to do with this acquisition. We've got Kirtland, then Nauvoo, and Independence is further out. Um, so I think it's been a long time coming, and the church has slowly acquired more and more things over time. I think as well, the value of Kirtland Temple to anyone else that's not in either of our religions is essentially land value. The value of Kirtland Temple, the building, is a value of naught, and the value of the blocks in Nauvoo, where those blocks are in Nauvoo, their value is nothing unless you're a church member. They're not in built up cities and metropolises. They're kind of out the back in the middle of nowhere, and you can legitimately go and buy a house there right now for $50,000
Yeah.
with a 1 or 2 bedroom property. So a lot of this is more historical value, and hopefully the deal was very good for both organizations. I know it certainly would be very good for our organization,
Well,
and who knows what else to
I
come.
believe the Church of Christ have said that because of this, they're able to sustain until the year 2034. So,
Wow.
for them, it's
Well,
good for them.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
just on the topic of Kirtland Temple, if you don't mind, I'd just like to read a quote by President Bednar about the Kirtland Temple. He says,
Right.
"The church may yet discover that Kirtland is our most significant history site. More heavenly manifestations occurred in Kirtland than any other place. God the Father and Jesus Christ appeared 4 times, and the Savior alone 6 more times." So, like you said, for a lot of people, it is land value, but for us, it's very, very significant historically
Yeah.
and really spiritually. It's an incredible place. The Doctrine and Covenants, there's so many times in there that Joseph Smith received revelations at Kirtland.
That's right. Yeah, Joseph Smith really got into his stride when Kirtland Temple was built. Joseph Smith was well in his stride. Um, there was some really, really good years. Joseph Smith essentially had a good year, then a bad year, a couple of bad years, a good year, and the time when Kirtland was dedicated was an absolute cracker time for Joseph and for the church. Lots of bad things were still to come, and so the church was still early, and all of the really um, challenges that came from opposition weren't really too hard at that stage. I think it's Doctrine and Covenants 88 where Joseph and Oliver Cowdery received the vision of the celestial kingdom, terrestrial and celestial kingdoms. That incredible section, I think, happened in the Kirtland Temple as
Yeah.
well. And I certainly should have done a bit more reading, but I remember from memory that people were there when they were receiving this revelation. People were there, and they said that their heads were glowing. That and both men were literally just standing in a room, and the reports from the other people, their heads were glowing as they were taken away into this vision, and all that happened in that place. We've got Elias and Elijah as well. And
Moses,
Moses
yeah, Moses
occurred
visited them as well. Yep, and
the temple.
that's when they were given the sealing powers and the power to baptize for the dead and all those important things pertaining to the priesthood and the importance of temples.
It's yeah, I actually can't wait till we talk about Doctrine and Covenants next year, and we can talk about the history of the church. There's so much to get through, and this is a real historical importance to us. Who knows? Maybe you and I will be able to get over there one day and have a look at it for ourselves.
Definitely.
But there's a big job. Whoever is in charge, I don't know if the Quorum of the 12 who's in charge of church history, but they've got a huge job now of going through those documents and making them available to us. Obviously, the Joseph Smith papers was a huge amount of work. We got that book, the Saints, didn't we? That big thick
Yep.
book, Saints, came out of a bit of that as well, and all of that's obviously online as well, free, and it really in high resolution to be looked at. So I can't wait till some of these things are released, and the church says to us, "Well, okay, all of these artifacts that we picked up, X, Y, Z, they're going to be at this museum. They're going to be here. They're all free entry, and the church certainly isn't going to be trying to get $200 million dollars back from its 200 million Aussie dollars back from its members. This all goes out free for people to go and look at and enjoy and feel inspired and connect with a bit of history. Obviously, so grateful for everyone who had a part of it. Emma Smith, Brigham Young said, "If Emma Smith doesn't make it to the celestial kingdom, neither will he."
Yeah, that's right.
So the work that she did and what she went through, and what a great history that she has, and putting so much effort in, obviously, to preserve these things. I think it was Louis Biderman when they were revamping the Smith home, found in the cornerstone, or one of the footstones, the original manuscript of the Book of Mormon. There's 28% or something that was only still found. So all of these things have happened, that all of these historical artifacts were able to be preserved. We're talking about the Book of Mormon in Come Follow Me right now. The sort of Laban was held on to for so long, and now we're seeing the exact same thing happen in our time. So many things were held on to for so long. So can't wait to see them and for them to be released and for us to get our teeth into and enjoy them. Excellent. Well, thank you. We thought we'd jump on and give an update and give our thoughts on this new news. We hope you guys are able to look into it as well, and send us any comments, send us any information. We'd love to have a read. and we'll talk to you all again. Our regular viewing of Come Follow Me, Book of Mormon 2024 is resuming. So thank you.
Thank you.